Greetings, Clariphiles and Clariphilettes across the fruited plain. For the last 4 or 5 or 6 years, goodness, seems like a long time, I've spent a lot of time on the internet, on YouTube, explaining a lot of things I understand about the clarinet and trying to help you understand it better and play better yourself. But this episode is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to talk about something I don't understand. And if some of you can explain it to me, I'd really like to hear about it. If you're interested, stay tuned. It may surprise some of you to know that I wasn't always like kind of a clarinet geppetto, kind of hobbling around and doddering around the shop, fixing this, that, and the other, and trying to help clarinet players play better by supplying better clarinets to them. No, I was like most of you guys, or many of you guys. I was a clarinet player, a professional clarinet player, and a professional clarinet teacher, and I spent a long time teaching the clarinet to people of all kinds of ages, from 8 to 82. It was pretty amazing. And so I had a lot of experience teaching, and unlike some professional clarinet players who are sort of have to teach, I loved teaching. And I loved helping people play the clarinet better and help them understand it better. And I also loved one more thing, and that is getting better and better equipment for them. So I was always on the search for better equipment. I was always willing to try things, to look into things, and give things my best shot because I was always looking for the best possible values for my students. I wasn't always looking for better equipment for myself, but ironically, sometimes I did find better equipment for myself in that search to help my students. And I was also interested in what we call value. Now, exactly what is value, or what is the best or better value? Well, the value is computed when you put the cost of a product and you stack it up compared to its compared to the benefits that it offers. Of course, if something is very inexpensive, if it offers no benefits, or if it becomes actually a liability, it's not much of a value. Something is only a value when the cost is low and when the benefits are high. And so I was always looking for something of the best or better value that I could give my students, trying to save them money and improve their equipment at the same time. Now that was my attitude, and I thought it was just kind of the normal attitude of clarinet players that cared about their students, of clarinet players that really wanted to teach better. And one of the things, of course, in teaching better that is really important is that the students have good equipment to work with, because they can't be successful if they're struggling and fighting with their equipment. Well, that was my attitude, and I've been shocked to understand and to learn over a long period of time that sadly that attitude seems to be the exception and not the rule. Let me see if I can explain. Let me see if I can begin my explanation not with some abstract description, but with a concrete, very clear story. A few years ago, a father called me up from Alaska, and he said, "I've been reading about all your stuff on the internet, and I've been looking at the reviews from people, and it really looks great. And so I think I'd like to order one for my daughter up here in, I think, Anchorage is where he lived." And I said, "Well, that's fine. We'll be happy to send you a clarinet. Have you spoken to your daughter's private teacher?" And he said, "Oh, no, we haven't spoken at all with her." And I said, "Well, could I ask you to do that? I want to encourage you to do that, because a lot of times private teachers are not the most open-minded people in the world. And so you might end up with the private teacher really objecting, and that sets up a conflict between the student and the teacher that your daughter doesn't really need." And he said, "Oh, I'm sure it's not going to be a problem at all. And look, just send the clarinet." And I said, "Okay, all right." It's really against my better judgment, but I'll be happy to do that. So we sent the clarinet, and a few days after it arrived, I got a rather contrite phone call from the father, same father, and he said, "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to let me return the clarinet." We took the clarinet down to my daughter played it, and she just loved it. And then we took her down for a lesson, and my daughter went into her lesson, and she came out crying, and I found out the reason was because the teacher was angry that we had purchased this clarinet, and she wouldn't even let her student, wouldn't even let my daughter take the clarinet out of the case and even to look at it, let alone to play it and test it and try it. Now, the daughter is angry at the father. The mother is angry at the father. The clarinet teacher is angry at the father. And the father has had nothing but a positive desire to get something very good for his daughter that would be affordable for the family. And the fly in the ointment was the clarinet teacher who was so narrow-minded that she wouldn't even let her student open the case. And all this conflict was caused because of that attitude and nothing else, especially after the daughter had played the clarinet and had liked it. I don't understand this kind of attitude. I really don't. Now, you take a place like Alaska that has a reputation for fairly foul weather, and you wonder, wouldn't a hard rubber clarinet that is stable and doesn't crack and doesn't create all the problems that wood clarinets do, wouldn't a hard rubber clarinet be great in a place like that? Because it would be worry-free. You would think that any reasonable clarinet teacher would think, well, you know, I've heard about this guy's clarinets, and his clarinets are supposed to be good, and gee, wouldn't it be a dream come true if he would have clarinets that are really great that we can use up here in Alaska, and then I wouldn't have to have students come in with broken hearts and singing a very sad song about how the clarinets have cracked. But that didn't seem to occur to the clarinet teacher. The only thing that the clarinet teacher had in mind was one thing with one label on it, and that was it, and nothing else was to ever even be considered. The case could not even be opened. At conventions, I often see clarinet teachers that have students that I know that are, in universities, in colleges, and I know that they're struggling, their parents are struggling to pay for the fees that really seem to be escalating all the time in universities. And it never occurs to the clarinet teachers to ever come near our booth, to ever test anything or try anything out, even though it may be possible that we have really wonderful playing instruments that would save the parents thousands of dollars and enable the student to actually have an instrument when they couldn't have an instrument otherwise. I mean, how many students can afford $14,000, $15,000, $16,000 for a low C bass clarinet, or $9,000 or $10,000, when we have a wonderful bass clarinet that professionals are playing all over the world that's $3,000? Well, I'm not sure exactly, but it's a little over $3,000. And it's a wonderful clarinet, extremely durable, and it's being played by road musicians that have to play Broadway musicals all over the place. But it never occurs to the teachers because the teachers have a narrow mindset, and they only think in this one mode. And I don't understand that. I don't understand it. Can someone explain to me why the students, or why the teachers don't seem to care at all for the students, or to have any thought or compassion for the parents, or to consider that there's any possibility other than the narrow framework that they've been basically conditioned into living in and thinking in and working in? It makes no sense to me. Sometime last summer, I met with some band directors, and I was presenting my clarinets and asking them to test them and explaining what they did and their virtues, and trying to give them some reasons for considering my instrument. Well, one of the band directors was a gentleman named Bob Stryka. Now, Bob's one of the most respected clarinet players and clarinet teachers in the whole North Texas area. He's been an extremely successful music educator, and like me, he has his master's degree in performance from Yale University. And so at that meeting, I asked Bob, I said, look, how about taking the 30-day challenge? And he looked at me quizzically like, well, what's the 30-day challenge? I said, you put your horn away and you play my clarinet for nothing, and only my clarinet for an entire month. Get used to it, play the music you've always played and loved, and after a month of playing it, if you can go back to your old clarinet, then you're welcome to it. Well, he took me up on that challenge. And at the end of the 30-day challenge, he bought my clarinet and ordered 3 more clarinets for his students. And a couple days ago, he wrote this and gave us permission to share it. He said, for as long as I've known Tom, I've admired his logic and steadfast dedication to making playing the clarinet simple and affordable to everyone. Still, I was skeptical when he tasked me with the 30-day lyric challenge this past summer. How could a hard rubber clarinet possibly compete with my R13, especially one costing less than, especially a clarinet that costs less than the E11 model? I played R13s for 38 years and felt that I owned a gem. In retrospect, I've tried and rejected far more buffets for myself as well as my students than I ever recommended. While I'm sure there are some really great ones still available, they're difficult to come across or be able to afford for all but the greatest artists. After the initial 3 or 4 days of getting used to the feel of the 576 Lyric, I began to realize just how much less effort it took to make great music on it. The Lyric allows me to shape beautiful phrases with accurate intonation. Denying my biggest doubt, I am able to make the instrument sing with the same colorful resonance as my own horn. Technical passages are much easier to perform confidently since every note responds the same from the altissimo through the shallow registers. The key action feels refined overall. My single concern in this area was a rather short or steep throat A key, which takes some getting used to, and makes rolling a challenge. Also, I did have to apply some Elmer's glue to reattach the felt to the inside of the case. When I did retry my R13 after playing for a full month on the Lyric, it felt blown out and somewhat unwieldy. I suddenly realized how much effort I had been expending to finesse the intonation and response idiosyncrasies of my beloved buffet. As an educator, this has been an even more important revelation. My middle school students most likely have no idea how to correctly affect the numerous subtle response and intonation deficiencies of their mostly intermediate level instruments. The Lyric clarinet will lift that responsibility from them and allow my students to perform to the best of their ability. I plan to recommend and use the 576 for all my clarinet students beginning this spring, and look forward to enjoying the musical results in the future. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and craft again, Tom. Well, that's a real nice response of Bob, and it's an informed response because Bob's a very thoughtful and excellent player. You would think that, and this Bob's case is not an isolated one when it comes to our clarinet, but you would think that when educators are confronted with this, no matter how entrenched their opinions and ideas are about their instrument, you would think that with the prospect of the parents and the students saving money and getting something that has many, many benefits, which would make a great value, you would think that they would say, well, you know, we should at least give it a try. And that's what I don't understand. Why don't people at least just give it a try when there's so much evidence that it's worth the effort?